first art teacher interview. Yay! We're excited. We're here today with artist, art teacher, and improv specialist, man of many trades and talents, Joseph Bennett. And Joseph,
welcome to the studio.
Well, let's get into a little bit more about you, Joseph. Can you tell me about your background as it relates to art and teaching?
I create assemblages out of found objects, things that other people may throw away to thrift stores or alleyways or trash cans, and I take those objects and I'm charged with the responsibility of creating really compelling, beautiful pieces of art.
When did you maybe decide, I'm going to start teaching this?
I think it was when I looked in my wallet and I had about 40 pesos left. The true answer is that there were a lot of people who were interested in assemblage, and maybe they felt like they couldn't draw and they couldn't paint and they were intimidated by other art forms. And this is a really beautiful art form because there's really no mistakes to be made. There's just an array of found objects, and people bring their objects to the classes as well, to the workshops, and they may say like, oh, I've had this broken teacup for years and I didn't want to get rid of it, and then it finds a perfect place in one of their sculptures or assemblages. I specialize in working with people who are maybe a little bit more intimidated and a little bit more fearful and maybe beginner artists,
Right.
because Jessica, I had so much training in therapy and psychiatry and counseling that I can really just appreciate and empathize with people.
Absolutely, I agree with you. That is something that I see with every class that comes through my art classes. There's always one person who is enthusiastic and obviously they want to learn art because they're in the class, but they'll take the sketchbook into our sketching San Miguel class and say, it's a really beautiful sketchbook, so I'm not going to actually draw in it because I don't want to mess it up. So there's such a psychological aspect of learning art, the mentality, so that's great.
It reminds me that in all of my workshops, whatever it is, I have a couple of guidelines and they're always the same. And one of the guidelines is no apologies. Because sometimes we show up to classes or to events and we apologize for ourselves in so many different ways. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, this isn't any good, hers is better than mine, or, oh, I'm not going to use the sketchbook because I might make mistakes. So I just encourage people, like, no apologies. Like, just show up exactly where you are and allow the process to happen without all of that mental chatter that happens.
Well, you have quite a reputation around town as a multi-passionate, hyper-creative person. You got the improv troupe, you have an interior design business, your artwork, art classes. You are obviously a person who's capable of not only coming up with the ideas, which is where many people kind of get stuck, but also creating them. And I was wondering if you had any insights for idea people on how to make it happen, how to take those ideas and make them physical in the world.
Great question. So the first thing, we'll back up a little bit, and the mental chatter that goes inside most of our heads about, I can't do this, or it's too much work, or nobody's going to show up. Just take that and set that aside for a little while and maybe let that simmer down or dissipate or completely disappear. And then there's a tool that I learned about that they used to teach salesmen in the 1950s, and that was called the Power Hour. So instead of, you may have had this experience where you try to get something accomplished for 10 hours a day, and at the end of the day you only have half of it accomplished, because as multi-passionate people, we can tend to get distracted, and then the phone rings, and then there's email, and then there's a Facebook message, and then, oh, we have to go get tortillas or whatever it is. So if we focus really for 1 hour on what our goal is for that day, whether it's sending out a newsletter or planning a class or building our email list or whatever that is, to focus on that 1 power hour, you will be amazed at how much you can get done without distractions. And that's really the key, is not allowing yourself to get distracted.
What would a student expect if they signed up and showed up at the studio door?
It's all very different because I teach a lot of different classes, but for the fine art classes, like an assemblage class, it's generally 4 to 5 hours.
Wow.
So it's from 11 to 3, so 4 hours. And they would they can anticipate bringing their own lunch, because I don't like people to have to leave and go eat someplace. I want to keep the energy here in the room.
Yeah.
And also bring a lot of their own materials, because as I said, that broken teacup that somebody really has loved all their lifetime, they don't know what to do with, so bring some of their own found object materials. They can expect instruction from me. The number one thing that I teach is safety, because a lot of the people that come here aren't used to working with drills and hot glue guns and screwdrivers and nails and splinters. So I really talk about safety a lot, because you may know this, when you're working in a multimedia environment, there's a lot of materials that are covering your workplace. So you need to be mindful of, are there rusty nails there, or are there Sharpie knives, or those kind of things. So that's what they can expect, is some instruction and a whole lot of openness, to not be so focused on the product. Like, you have to have something really wonderful by 4 o'clock, to really just enjoy the process. And I ask for people to do a lot of pausing, so to take a look at the piece and then step back and look at it, maybe turn it upside down or turn it around. And then at the end, we always do a little bit of show and tell.
Great.
So that people can go up and have an experience of what it's like to talk about their art, to talk about their process. What were they thinking about when they were creating this piece? Do they have a title for it? Because I believe it's important to have a title for pieces. And then invite questions and comments. So even for a brand new artist, they have an experience of what it's like to show their work to somebody else, to talk about it, and then get some feedback right there that very first day.
That is so important. Just about wraps it up. Any final words of advice to art students out in San Miguel?
Go into your studio and make stuff.
Yes. And definitely agreement there. So thank you so much, Joseph.
Thank you.
It's such a pleasure.
My pleasure, Jessica.
And let's take a minute to check out Joseph's workstation.
So that drill is probably as old as you are, Jessica.
Oh my goodness.
I love that drill, and every time I use it, I'm like, please keep working, because with the materials that I use, I like old patina characters. So to go to like Home Depot and buy a brand new drill, it's just not going to be the same.
Well, I'm kind of jealous, because I normally just work with oil paints and pencils, and this is a lot more fun. So
Well, you're going to come to a workshop soon.
I sure hope so. And what fun just to get to collect beautiful things and interesting objects. I imagine the Tuesday market must be a big place for you to get items.
Tuesday market, plus people bring me things, they drop things off at the door and say, can you use this? Or when I go to thrift stores, because there's not a whole lot of thrift stores here in San Miguel de Allende. So when I go to the States, I always bring an extra box or an extra suitcase just to get materials, which is kind of hard to get through security when you have like things like this. They're like, why do you have this, sir? Things like that.
Right.
And like I said, I generally have a cleaner work area, but I've been working on 2 pieces this week. So I just bring a lot of materials out and see what works. And it's a lot of trial and error.
Well, this just looks like too much fun.
You can say things like, oh, doesn't this look really great? But then you have to figure out, how are you going to attach those two things? Because you might be shipping it to Poughkeepsie, New York, and you want to make sure that it gets there in one piece. You want to make sure that it outlives you. So when people come for their workshops, I talk a lot about how are you going to attach this. And I don't want to just be doing big old globs of glue and sticking things in. I really like tension to create objects, so that things fit inside of each other in a really nice way, so that they're just there at tension. And then nails and screws and drilling, and then glues would be last.
Science and engineering meets art, and
and physics and all those things.
Well, multi-talented, multi-passionate, and multi-minded when it comes to sciences and arts. Made that word up, but it works. Great. Well, thank you for sharing your space with us, Joseph, and we look forward to seeing more of your artwork.
Thanks.